So, let's talk about something. Today, we have all these words for how our brains work. We have labels like autism, Asperger's, doctors, therapists, big thick books that try to explain it all. It's like we have a detailed map of the human mind. But long before these maps, people navigated this territory just fine. In Africa, my home continent, those stories weren't written in medical journals. They were woven into everyday life, songs, traditions. These weren't patients, they were just people with unique ways of being. Think about it. Diagnosing someone with a disorder is a modern, Western idea. It assumes anything not normal needs to be fixed. For thousands of years in African societies, the focus wasn't on fixing people. It was about finding where they fit. A person who didn't make eye contact but could remember every single star in the sky wasn't broken. They had a gift. A child sensitive to loud noises who could hear a snake slithering in the grass from far away wasn't a problem. They were a protector. It was a completely different operating system. The story of autism in Africa isn't about its absence. It's about the absence of the label, intense focus, unique social interactions, deep knowledge of a specific subject. These behaviors were interpreted through a different lens. Let's go way back. I'm talking prehistoric back. In the dense forests where pygmy communities lived, survival depended on everyone playing their part. Imagine a young person who doesn't enjoy the loud chatter of the group, but can sit for hours, patiently and silently chipping away at a piece of flint until it becomes the sharpest spearhead anyone has ever seen. In a modern classroom, they might be seen as withdrawn or antisocial. But in that context, they were a genius. They were the master toolmaker, the one who ensured the hunters had the best equipment. Their intense focus wasn't a deficit, it was a superpower that fed the entire village. This wasn't just a one-off thing. Across the continent, you see similar patterns. Among the Bantu peoples, oral history was everything. Now, who do you think was the best person to remember these epic tales, word for word, generation after generation? It was often the person with a phenomenal memory for detail, someone who might not be the life of the party, but could recall the names of 1,000 ancestors. These individuals became the living libraries of their people. Griots, historians, even spiritual beliefs made room for different ways of thinking. In many traditional African religions, it was believed that some people had a closer connection to the spirit world. A child who seemed to be in their own world might be seen as someone who could communicate with ancestors or nature spirits. They weren't seen as unwell. They were seen as having a foot in two worlds: seers, healers, mystics. So when you look at the Swahili traders along the coast, the Bantu farmers in the south, or the pygmy hunters in the central forests, you find this recurring theme. Society was flexible enough to create roles for people who didn't fit the typical mold. A person's value wasn't determined by their ability to socialize in a normal way. It was determined by their contribution, their skills, their unique gifts. This wasn't a formal system with written rules. It was a deeply ingrained communal understanding that diversity was a source of strength, not weakness. It was inclusion naturally. Now let's move forward in time to the Great Kingdoms. Ethiopia, one of the oldest civilizations in the world, has a long history of a different kind of social safety net. With its ancient Christian traditions, the community played a huge role in caring for all its members. If a person had what we might now call developmental differences, they weren't cast out. Instead, the family would rally around them, the church would rally around them, and the village would rally around them. The belief was that every person was a child of God. It was the community's sacred duty to provide support. It was a system built on compassion, not clinical diagnosis. In these powerful kingdoms, people with unique minds were often integrated into the very heart of society. Think of the Ethiopian scribes. They spent their lives in monasteries, painstakingly copying religious texts. This required incredible focus, a love of repetition, a sharp eye for detail. These are traits often found in autistic individuals. Their work was not just valued, it was considered holy. They were the keepers of knowledge and faith. Their quiet dedication was seen as a form of divine service. They weren't isolated because they were different. They were revered for their special contributions. Then, as Islam spread across North and West Africa, it brought a new wave of thinking about mental health. During the Islamic Golden Age, cities developed hospitals with special wards for mental and neurological conditions. Cairo, Timbuktu. These weren't prisons or scary asylums, they were places of care. Bimaristans. Patients were treated with kindness, given good food, fresh air, and even music therapy. The approach was rooted in the Islamic value of compassion for all. It saw the mind as something that could be unwell, but always worthy of gentle care. This compassionate view was a game-changer. It medicalized conditions without dehumanizing people. The focus was on healing and comfort, not punishment or exclusion. Religious teachings emphasized caring for the vulnerable as a path to spiritual reward. So, communal care in the Ethiopian highlands. Organized medical systems in Islamic cities. These were incredible pockets of progress in Africa. They showed you could build powerful, sophisticated societies that still had a heart. Societies that found a place for everyone, no matter how their mind worked. And then, everything changed. When European colonial powers arrived in Africa, they didn't just bring guns and flags, they brought their own ideas. Guns, flags, ideas. And their ideas about the human mind were very, very different. Psychology, psychiatry, categorizing people, normal, abnormal, deficient, disordered. Suddenly, the African wisdom of finding a place for everyone was dismissed as primitive and unscientific. The rich mosaic of human diversity was bulldozed to make way for a rigid black and white worldview. The colonial administrators and missionaries saw the traditional African views of neurodiversity, spiritual explanations, specialized community roles, as superstition. The village seer wasn't a wise person with a special connection to the unseen world anymore. They were now labeled hysterical or insane. The quiet, focused artisan wasn't a master craftsman. They were unproductive or withdrawn. The very traits that had once been sources of respect and value were now turned into symptoms of a disease, reasons for shame and stigma. It was a complete reversal of centuries of cultural understanding. Colonialism introduced the asylum, a concept largely foreign to many parts of the continent. Instead of community care, the solution for people who were different became isolation. People were taken from their families and villages and locked away in institutions, often in terrible conditions. This was done in the name of progress and modern medicine, but it was a brutal and dehumanizing system. It taught a terrible lesson, that people with different minds were a problem to be hidden away, not a part of the community to be embraced. This fear and shame started to seep into the culture, replacing the old ways of inclusion. The legacy of this period is long and dark. The traditional support systems were weakened, and in their place came a new language of pathology and deficiency. African families were taught to see their loved ones through this new negative lens. The idea that a neurodivergent child could be a gift from the ancestors was replaced by the fear that they were a curse or the result of witchcraft, a twisted version of old beliefs now mixed with new anxieties. Colonialism didn't just steal Africa's resources, it tried to steal its soul, its deep-seated wisdom about what it means to be human in all our varied forms. Fast forward to today, 2025. Africa is at a fascinating crossroads. The shadow of the colonial era still lingers, but something new is happening. Families across the continent are navigating a complex world, trying to find the best way to support their autistic children. On one hand, you have the pull of tradition. Some families might first visit a spiritual healer or a traditional herbalist. They are searching for a spiritual explanation for a way to restore balance. On the other hand, the modern world is here. Parents are logging onto the internet, joining Facebook groups, learning the language of Western medicine. They're seeking out occupational therapists, speech pathologists, special needs schools. They fight for a diagnosis because a diagnosis can open doors to educational support, to therapy, and to a community of other parents who understand. It's this incredible blend of old and new. A mother might pray with the village elder in the morning and drive her child to a therapy session in the afternoon. But this crossroads is not an easy place to be. The stigma that took root during colonial times is still a huge challenge. In many communities, there's a profound lack of awareness about what autism is. A child's behavior might be misunderstood as disobedience or the result of poor parenting. This can lead to isolation. with families feeling ashamed and hiding their children away, fearing judgment from their neighbors. The gap in resources is also massive. A family in a big city like Nairobi or Lagos might have access to cutting-edge therapies, while a family in a rural village has none. Despite these hurdles, there is so much progress. All across the continent, amazing grassroots organizations are popping up, often started by parents themselves. These groups are fighting to raise awareness, to provide training for teachers, and to create safe spaces for autistic children and adults. They are translating medical information into local languages and adapting therapies to fit the African cultural context. They are the new community builders, proving that the spirit of communal care is alive and well. They are the ones standing at this crossroads and trying to build a bridge between the two worlds. So, where do we go from here? The answer, I think, is not about choosing between the past, the present. It's about weaving them together, reclaiming ancient African wisdom that saw value in every individual and combining it with the best of modern science and understanding. We don't have to throw away the medical knowledge that helps us understand the autistic brain. But we don't have to accept Western cultural baggage of stigma, pathology. We can take the science, leave the judgment behind. This new dawn for autism in Africa is about building a future based on Ubuntu. I am because we are. A community is strongest when it supports all its members, especially the most vulnerable.